You guys are weird. Is it hot or cold?
Kind of cold. It's kind of cold.
Yeah.
How about hot?
So it's a beautiful, hot day out here in Otis, and the kids are in the pool enjoying the water. But it's also Thursday of Holy Week, what's known as Maundy Thursday. Maundy coming from I think the Latin word that has to do with command. I don't know much Latin. I know Spanish, and the Spanish word for command is mandato. And I think that the root comes from that same Latin word, mandi, which means to command. And obviously, it's referring to Jesus giving a new command, which is him telling his disciples to love each other, which is something that he did at the Passover meal that he took with them right after the Last Supper. He washes their feet. Or before the meal, he washes their feet. And so I want to read that passage to you. It's John 13, 1 through 17, and then jumping forward to 31 through 35. It says, "Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and to go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end." So notice how it says that Jesus knew that his hour had come. And so even though Jesus is facing disappointment and he's facing betrayal, he also is confident of what is going on, and he has this security in knowing that this is a part of God's plan. And it makes such a difference in our lives when we are reassured in knowing that even the dark times are a part of God's plan. Now, we may not understand how they fit into God's plan, but we can be like Jesus and know that God has all the times appointed, and he's working even in the dark times. So Jesus, knowing that his hour had come and it was time for him to go, he decided to love his disciples, to show them how much he loved them by serving them. So it says, verse 2, John 13, "The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, he got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself." I want to ask you, do you know where you're from and where you're going? Do you know where you're from and where you are going? Jesus knew that he had come from the Father, and he knew that he was going to the Father, and because he knew where he was from and where he was going, he could serve and love others even in the face of disappointment and grief and sorrow and pain. And it's vital that we know where we're from and that we know where we're going. If you remember back a couple of passages ago, we remember Jesus talking to the Greeks, and he said, "Believe in the light while you have the light so that you can become children of light." The idea is that if you have faith in Jesus, then you know where you're from the Father, and you know where you're going to the Father, and that gives you a lot of confidence to serve and love others, even in the face of difficult times, which is what Jesus does here. He ties a towel around himself, and he washes his disciples' feet. So it says, verse 5, "He poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, 'Lord, are you going to wash my feet?'" Now, remember, they still look at Jesus as a messianic figure. They still think of him as royalty. Royalty would never get on their hands to wash the feet. Royalty would, the Messiah would never become the servant in their minds. But Jesus is saying in verse 7, you do not know what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." So Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not only my feet, but also my hands and my head." And Jesus said to him, "One who is bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was going to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, put on his robe, and returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. And so if I, your Lord and your teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet." Remember how we talked about Jesus is equipping his disciples to come face to face with disappointment, to come face to face with difficulty, with pain, and with sorrow. He's trying to teach them how to deal with these things and still glorify God. And so one of the things that he says is, "I'm your Lord and I'm your teacher, and if I, in the face of the cross, am serving you, then I want you to do the same thing." Even when you're faced with difficulties in your life, the way to push through that is by serving and loving each other. So he says in verse 15, "I have set you an example that you should also do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." And so some of the last things that Jesus said to his disciples was to love each other, to follow his example, and serve and love each other. And that's how people would know that we belong to him. And so remember Jesus, that even in the face of disappointment and death, he knew where he came from, he knew where he was going, and that gave him the confidence to be able to love and serve his disciples, even in those difficult moments. And he expects us and encourages us to do the same. How can we know where we're from and know where we're going? By putting all of our faith in Jesus, who shows us that even in the face of death, we can look forward to the reality of resurrection afterwards. So these kids are going to say goodbye, and we're going to continue to enjoy the sun. Have a blessed day, and see you tomorrow for Good Friday. You guys say bye.